Hello, I'm Suparna Banerjee and a very warm welcome to all participants. Welcome to the second session today by BOMA India Summit Week, Contagion to Cure, Innovation, Entrepreneurship and Breakthroughs in Response to COVID-19. A bit about me, I'm a leadership coach and a tech entrepreneur based in Gurgaon. I'm here with BOMA India today to host this session as a moderator, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. One of my passion areas as a coach is to steer discovery conversations and to connect dots with experts and leaders so as to bring perspectives which are insightful and invaluable for one and all. A bit of introduction to BOMA and BOMA India. BOMA is a global network offering transformational learning experiences through corporate leadership and executive programs, workshops, and summits. In a world of dramatic and continuous change, BOMA believes that our learning can be more intentional and intelligent about the future. At BOMA, we believe that systems change can only happen when everyone is involved in the conversation. So from the government leaders, corporate bodies, professionals, entrepreneurs, to communities, nonprofits, students, everybody. And we are delighted to be partnering with LiveMint as our strategic alliance partner for our ongoing summits and transformational experiences. Now, a bit of context to the webinar today. Now, as the world sets out on the path to recovery and growth, we are beginning to see a wave of innovations come forward by individuals, research institutions, technologists, and manufacturers. This is all to combat and contain the outbreak as well as fuel social and economic recovery. And throughout this week, across different countries, Poland, China, Brazil, New Zealand, and India, in our BOMA Innovation Week, we have been exploring answers to two very crucial questions. How prepared are entrepreneurs and businesses to use crisis and uncertainty as a catalyst for innovation and creativity? And the second question, what are the new opportunities which can be found from the shifting mindsets, behaviors, and habits that we have formed in the midst of the COVID pandemic? Now, with this, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for this session today, Dr. Somdat Singh. Som is a digital entrepreneur, MD of Acidus Group, an e-commerce expert, and an ex-co-chair NASSCOM Product Council. She's also an advisor on Niti Aayog and Bloomberg Quint. And Som's work has been primarily in building a demand-based manufacturing framework steered through online behavior driven by Industry 5.0. And this is something which we'll be picking up in our session today. What is Industry 5.0? So a few areas which will be part of Som's presentation in today's session is, first of all, the impact of deep learning and agile research methodologies in businesses, and how do we leverage technology and data science to determine systematic demand. Another area of intervention would be how to create an optimal manufacturing plan efficient product launches and seamless supply chain management. And this is where Som will talk about her definition of Industry 5.0. And finally, another area would be how in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era, digital mapping of demand and products will be ideated and launched based on using supervised machine learning approaches. So without any delay, I hand it over to Som. Som, I'm sure the audience would be delighted to hear from your perspective. So over to you for your presentation.
A very good afternoon to everybody listening in today. I hope everybody is doing well and keeping safe. Suparna, thank you so much for that warm introduction, and a big namaste to everybody. And I'm really grateful to BOMA and BOMA Global for giving us this opportunity to share our knowledges and experiences. Well, these times are unexpected, unprecedented, and unparalleled. Who would have thought that 2020, a new year, a new decade that began with great positivity, there was a war that would ensue us? A raging war where it's not a man against man, but it's not even a man against nation, but all of mankind trying to save its very kind. Today, as the world stands still, economies crumble under the burden of this unforeseen force of nature, with mankind at the very threshold of obsolescence. We will not give up. Corporations across the board is picking up battle on this global crisis. Yes, humanity is being tested, and we also are rising to this challenge. Although the parts of the pandemic and the economy are rife with uncertainty, we are confronting this crisis with utmost certainty. With this, I begin my presentation today, and I will focus on talking about building a demand-based manufacturing framework steered through online behavior driven by Industry 5.0. I am going to share my screen and take you guys through the presentation today. Well, like I said, my topic is building a demand-based manufacturing framework steered through online behavior driven by Industry 5.0. And I will start by playing this video. Well, Industry 4.0, all of us listening today are well aware of the 4.0 paradigm, perception versus reality. The 4.0 promised to transform the way engineers designed, built products, a paradigm shift from centralized to decentralized manufacturing, and alter the traditional role of assembly lines. The perception was displacement of labor. However, the positive reality was far from the negative perception. Skilled workforces were upskilled, manpower was developed and nurtured, less waste was generated, and products were built that was highly sustainable and allowed the production line to become even more efficient. Let's look at some data. 27% of increase in skilled jobs. So while the perception is always that machine is going to replace man, we often forget that machine is a creation of man and not vice versa. 38% less spillage and wastage globally. 22% increase in multi-floor manufacturing. And what do we mean by multi-floor? It means that a production line was no longer just dedicated to building one kind of product. So if you were a manufacturing company building nutraceutical products, you could now have machines for beauty, making beauty products, and you can also have machines to make consumer durables. So that way, the capacity planning of a manufacturing unit became highly optimized. Well, what did the transition lead to? The transition to personalization, where ethnography, which means displacement of using primary research methods, which were more retail-led, more feet on street, was now displaced with net data, data of real-time user behavior that was going to drive how manufacturing, how production line, how capacity planning will be built. Well, with the dawn of 2010, there was a new maxim, and the maxim was the MAD technique. The MAD technique defined man, automation, and demand. And the most important part of that is that one was leading to the other. So there was data that was mobilizing men to build automation that was about to revolutionize how production capacity was built and planned and transformed. Well, here comes COVID. Who would have imagined 2020, where the transition from 4.0 to 5.0 seemed like a more subtle one, is now going to be one where a huge shift is going to happen. That's called a forced consumer behavior. And we're going to focus on what Industry 5.0 really entails for us. Well, being relevant in real time. The COVID pandemic has obligated man to stay indoors, thereby altering their buying behavior drastically. The anxiety over the virus increases. Online retail has witnessed a massive surge. People are now buying everything online. So 26% increase in online orders globally. And this has happened, Suparna, in just the last 90 days. So imagine how forced consumer behavior can actually change the entire, global, buying scenario, the entire production planning, the entire industry at large. 37% increase in traffic alone in the standalone e-commerce sites. So if you see WooCommerce, if you see Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, now see 37% additional traffic. Why? People are not going out. They have no choice but to buy online. And a lot of it is tier 2 and tier 3 people who were not so online friendly, have no opportunity, and thus are transacting online. So why Industry 5.0 and how do we define it? Industry 5.0 is characterized by the cooperation between machines and human beings. And human beings is where you can't displace is the creative part of it. So 13% of new products in the industry is out of the basic thought of creativity as to how to disrupt. So over the last few months, there are new immunity products that has gone launched in the market in a matter of 3 months, which was never there. And Suparna, most of them are private label brands that are not a part of big conglomerate, but they're independent brands built through contract manufacturing, being introduced online, and consumers are flocking to buy them. Hyper-personalization. Now, Industry 5.0 before COVID was all about personalization. Why do I call it hyper-personalization? Because the brand loyalty now is being built online. It's not going to a store. It's not touching and experiencing products, but it's more need-based fulfillment. So 43% increase in brand loyalty and 22% reduce in returns. So the number of people returning goods has also reduced. So the shift, if you see, from Industry 4.0 to 5.0 is so large, and it's going to stay that way because that is how demand will be defined. Going to the next slide. What do I define Industry 5.0 as? It's an imperative that businesses keep themselves relevant and in future to meet the escalating transforming demand. So it's not simply about data and artificial intelligence, but it's data and artificial intelligence for personalization. So the answer could be in new products, services, attention to paid about the creativity to solve business needs. Most importantly, manufacturing is going to embrace it with full potential. So what does SAFE really stand for? SAFE, if you break it down, is not just S for safe, A for accessible, and F for feasible. If you marry all the three, Suparna, what we get is E, that is e-commerce. And that to me is Industry 5.0. It is going to be an e-commerce driven revolution that is going to define how marketing, manufacturing, and consumption is going to happen over time. And not only that, it's going to open doors for more exports, especially for the MSME. You can now just ensure that you can do cross-border border trade without too much of bureaucracy, without too much of paperwork. It's all going to look very seamless because social distancing is not going to go anywhere. No touch delivery is going to be the new mantra. Convenience is going to drive user behavior. Affordability is what is going to be about the price points, because so many new private label players are going to ensue that there is more price competition, making the user or the buyer at the winning point because they'll have more options to choose from. And when you're looking online, you're doing parity mapping, you're doing mapping of components, you're doing mapping of ingredients. So it's a much more informed buying decision. And finally, it's all very personalized. And why do I say or emphasize the word personalized? Is because when you are buying and the data is mapped, at the back end, the seller gets to know which ingredient or which particular keyword actually led to the ultimate fulfillment of that order. So they will emphasize on those words, on those ingredients, and thereby drive more consumer traffic and fulfillment. Going on to my next slide. Well, big data in e-commerce, which is what today makes Amazon a multi-billion-dollar company, is all about consumer data. Today, even Alexa is listening to what you're talking about, your discussions, and giving that intelligence back to Amazon is how Amazon is determining what is going to come on their banner. How is their product line going to look like, or what kind of new buy categories are they going to introduce? So Amazon now, in the last 3 months, have not only beauty as a category, but they're calling it affordable beauty as a category as well, especially in Amazon.com. So 91% of the Fortune 1000 companies are investing in big data analytics because that's oil. Well, as you know, a little bit of fun, the oil and gas market has taken a big hit during this pandemic and people have lost billions of dollars, but people are now investing the same billions of dollars in the new oil, which is big data. And that is what is going to drive product insights, predict demand, and the launch of new product. So forget about the days when you would wait on primary research data to decide what product you're going to buy and then do capacity planning in your manufacturing. So there was a lot of idle inventory that never moved. And that was a lot of money lying in the shelf, which could be reutilized and repurposed. Now that entire map has changed. And I want to give you a case study about us, which I'm sure our viewers listening in today can relate to. We built a multi-billion-dollar, I would say, like, in the multi-billion-dollar keto industry, we made close to about 300, 400, just $1 million in selling our keto brand. And this basically came from that keto was becoming such a prominent product in the consumer segment. And this is all about, I'm talking about e-commerce in the United States. It was becoming such a big rage that we decided to not just launch one brand of keto. If you just look at the slide that I've presented here, you will see some of the products have a similar design and have a similar context, and they all belong to us. So this is how you actually dominate page one. You have one product with similar ingredients, with a little enhanced ingredient, all launched in the same category. So when the consumer is going to buy from you, they will see a $24.99 product, they will see a $30.99 product, but depending on what suits them, if they want a keto regular to a keto max, they end up buying the product. We sold this business for multi-million dollars. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. This entire business was based on machine learning, big data, and constantly monitoring the market trends. We never stopped looking at intelligence that came from the users. And how do you map that intelligence? When a buyer looks for a particular keyword on Amazon, there are tools in the backend that allows you to look how many searches or how many million searches that particular keyword has had in a given period of time. And that's how you decide the potential demand that you will have for that particular category. So when you are planning your MOQ, which is also called as a minimum order quantity from a manufacturer, you exactly know that that's the quantity you can sell. So there is no idle stock, there is no lost inventory, and there is no lost money if there is suddenly a shift or change that happens, like what happened in COVID-19, where retail stores were all shut down. So what do you do with products that sitting on the shelf? But in online, which is what is user behavior-led manufacturing and intelligence-led manufacturing, you do away with that because you don't have any products sitting on shelf. It's all product that is sitting online and the user is constantly going there, so your chances of conversion is always higher. The problem solution approach, which is also very, very important to keep in mind, is that at the end of the day, you are not selling based on a perception that there is going to be a certain trend in the market. You already know people are looking for weight loss products. So you know that if you launch keto, your chances of success is going to be a lot higher. And that's how you build product. And if you see, you don't see here the name of the brand. So do you see how industry 5.0 has changed, Suparna? It's no longer brand driven. It's a problem solution driven. I'm looking at weight loss, so I'm looking at keto, and nowhere here you're going to see the name of the brand. It just says keto, keto max, keto extreme, because that's what the consumer is looking at. And these all lead to agile manufacturing. You are leveraging the manufacturing based purely on demand that is mapped with analytics. And it is not something that is going to change because of a pandemic or because of any adverse effect in the economy, because it's going to stay constant. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So what does the 5.0 business model look like? So the 5.0 business model looks like making confident decisions by using data and driving operational efficiency. So when I say confident product decision, we have multiple nutraceutical products that we have launched over the last 5 years. Now, when the COVID pandemic hit, I launched an immunity product which has elderberry and vitamin C, because all the doctors were talking about the elderberry extract playing a very important role in building your immunity. So the moment you launch a product like that, because of the search and because of what the market is saying, immediately started doing 100 sales per day. So my test to market, which is what was taking so much time in industry 3.0 and 4.0, was substantially reduced now. So I don't have to do any test to market. My test to market happens directly with the consumer. And the machine learning and IoT plays a very important role here. So every time I have technology at the back, which is allowing me to determine the buying behavior, which is what ethnography is about, prolonged buying behavior with a given period of time, allowing you to analyze to analyze intelligence that leads to product innovation. So I can quickly now pivot. I can quickly now diversify. So we came up with a COVID line. We launched our own N95, our own PP, our own OPD kits in a matter of 2 months, because most consumers were going online to search for it. And remember, PPE kit is not just for frontline workers. People who are now taking a flight to travel outside is using that too. So a lot of my consumer data, which is coming through my machine learning, which is allowing me to determine user behavior way in advance, is allowing me to launch products quickly and monetize. So even when the pandemic hit, we were still making all our money without losing any iota of business. So that's the whole objective of 5.0. Quick innovation, quick implementation, quick monetization. And most importantly, when I talk about trends and demand-led manufacturing, that's what the agile methodology and agile manufacturing comes into play. That a manufacturing company now has actual data to plan their labor, their inventory, and most importantly, their raw material utilization. So a nutraceutical company, like I said when I started my presentation, is now also having machine to do N95 production, also having machines to do beauty products, and also having machines within the same capacity to build other products which are consumer-led, right? So that's the whole idea of 5.0, that big data-led manufacturing optimized through machine learning that allows quick monetization. And most importantly, COVID has taught us to value nature. So lesser waste, lesser spillage, most importantly, reutilization of resources. So there are manufacturing units who are using the byproducts that are left from the core manufacturing to use other products. And I know one such who's using the remaining of bamboo waste to make straws. And these straws are supposed to be a lot more environmental friendly than the normal straws that you get. So lesser plastic, lesser waste, more sustainability, and that's at the end of the day the goal. Direct to consumer. Well, I am going to spend just about 1.5 minutes on this, where I say that I am not waiting now for a customer to walk into my store to experience my product and buy it. I understand the needs of my customer a lot better. There is lesser human intervention to determine what my consumer is actually looking for. I can predict demand a lot more intelligently, and my fulfillment, especially because it's direct to consumer and online, I'm able to track how my consumer is actually experiencing the product. So I am able to stay in touch, which allows me to upsell and cross-sell to the customer, which is not possible in retail, Suparna and everybody who's listening, because in retail, you have to wait for the customer to come back to you again to upsell a product. So it's so much more push, it's so much more intuitive, and it's so much more design-led that's where the whole personalization and brand building and the emotional connection with the brand starts building. So a lot of private brand owners, especially MSMEs, who are the backbone of an economy like India, have now an opportunity to have sustainable growth without getting affected by any sudden change in economic behavior. So that's what Industry 5.0 entails for us. Now, here's a case study, which is what I wanted to show before I take any questions from you, Suparna, or questions from our listeners today. The case study was that when you know that wearing a mask is now the new normal. Like I was indeed like having a chat with a friend of mine. I said the next fashion week, which will also be maybe on a Zoom, will be wearing masks, because from a Louis Vuitton to a Fendi to a Ferragamo are all coming up with their masks. And as you know, everybody from a Peter England to Attitude, all of these brands which are in fashion have all diversified into building masks. And that's what we did quickly too. So we have a lingerie line which uses antimicrobial fabric to make the lingerie, and the same fabric we used to actually launch masks, because we tested and found out that it has 95% filtration efficiency. So you see how what we had allowed us to quickly diversify because of the knowledge, because of the data-based decision-making process, because of the machine learning intuitiveness, that we quickly could diversify and launch go-to-market products in such a short span of time, which ideally would not have been possible if this was 2 or 3 years back. And that is how you leverage Industry 5.0. Hyper-personalization, intuitive buying behavior led by big data, and most importantly, application of machine learning for constant pivot and diversification. And I think there's a big opportunity, especially in India, to grab this and make the most of this, because there's so much of forced users that are now online that a lot of small retailers can actually become e-tailers. And that's why Reliance and Jio introduced their collaboration at such a pivotal time. They talked about the whole hyper-local business, the whole Kirana store to going online business, that there is no opportunity for idle inventory anymore. With that, I wrap up my presentation and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Som. This was just such a fascinating summary of what's going on. And it looks like, at a time when so many businesses under the lockdown have been holding on to inventories, have been so worried about pushing products out and, drop in sales, you've made a phenomenal, it's been a phenomenal opportunity for your business. And really very insightful how big data analytics can completely change the game in personalization and anticipating demand and fulfillment, so many aspects. So my question to you is, so if you were to talk to entrepreneurs and businesses here, what would you tell them on the practical thing? What would be the first couple of steps to move towards an industry which is 5.0? What are the steps to be taken to move and transition without waiting for too long?
I think that's a phenomenal question you ask, and most of the times what holds back an entrepreneur is the apprehension whether I'm going to succeed or not, right? Well, it takes a very simple step. The first step is intent, right? You need to know and want to make that change. I remember just about a month back, there was a big war between the Retail Association of India and the E-commerce Association of India, because one was saying, if my shop cannot open, e-commerce cannot go live. Why do we forget that at the end of the day, it is a survival of the economy? So if you're an entrepreneur and if you are in the area of manufacturing, so either one, you're a manufacturer, or you're using contract manufacturing to build products. The first and the most important thing to remember is to go to a contract manufacturer who has a multi-floor capacity, which means if you tomorrow want to diversify, they are able to quickly help you out to do that. That is one. If you are a manufacturer and if you're just doing garments or if you're just doing products in healthcare, it's very, very important for you to turn yourself into a multi-floor manufacturing. So even if brands pull out, so if you're in fashion, I know that H&M and Marc Jacobs does a lot of their manufacturing in India, but they've stopped. They've stopped since the pandemic hit. So what happens with their idle capacity? They're now making masks and they're now making PPE suits. But what I would say is that if you are in the garment manufacturing business, well, doing masks and PPE suits is a great idea, but you don't know how long that's going to last. It's very important to convert that capacity into other product planning as well, which means that you can actually build gears, or you can actually do a lot of pharmaceutical work that is possible if you have idle capacity. So also displacement of machines, or what I would say is quickly converting what you have to newer machines so that you are able to fulfill the current demand is also important for a manufacturer. So I'm going to name one, which is Tirupati. They have a factory in Himachal. So what they did was they converted their floors into different segments, right? They had like about over a 7-acre factory, and they converted that into different capacity. So that is one thing which is for manufacturers to keep in mind. And they're now doing volumes because they're taking on product for Cipla, for Lupin, because none of these brands have everything under one wing. The other thing for an entrepreneur to keep in mind is please don't forget to upskill yourself. I am not an e-commerce graduate. I'm an economics PhD. I learned the nuances of e-commerce because I wanted to get into the business. And now I know it at the back of my hand. What most entrepreneurs struggle with is they can't detach themselves from the idea that they already have and try and pivot quickly. I think it's very important for an entrepreneur to be detached, because otherwise you can't innovate. And need, like they say, is the mother of innovation. So one, quickly have the intent to move forward. Secondly, tie up with the right manufacturing capacity if you are not a manufacturer yourself and you're using contract manufacturing. The other thing is go global. You have to look beyond just your own country. We make more money in the United States because the margins are greater. And that's what a smart entrepreneur does. They quickly look at a global opportunity for the products. And that's what I'm going to tell. Like, all it took us is to, like PM Modi said, vocal to local to global. I add the global at top of it. So I think that's the method that they need to adopt.
I think some very interesting examples and cases which you shared, and thank you very much, because it helps us to think out of the box at a time when we are, like you very rightly said, we're too attached to our business models, and we're too attached to our categories, and the whole thing really comes down to thinking it's a learning mindset, to be able to shift that. A great time to, in fact, get into conversations which will allow us as businesses and entrepreneurs to kind of break the paradigm we have boxed ourselves into, and to become as fluid as Industry 5.0 is, because that is very intelligent. But what I think a lot of people are struggling today, even right now, is the uncertainty and the anxieties, and just simply the holding on to what has been. And there are so many opportunities which you've highlighted. It is there. It's a matter of just thinking laterally, thinking out of the containers, and look at, go on that exploration. So that appetite to learn, explore, discover, I think if that is stimulated, then a lot of things become possible, and one can see the possibilities, and we can connect the dots, and we can see where what we need to steer, where we need to steer our businesses. Thank you very much.
Let me end with an example. Himalaya, which is a very, very well-known brand, and
look at go on an exploration.
Everything shut down when the pandemic hit them, but they were online. So they were doing about 20% of their revenue online, but now they're at 46%. So if you see in 30 days, the shift that has happened from the 20 to 46% just goes to show how it's not about the product. It's about the agility. It's about the mindset. It's, at the end of the day, the ability to quickly pivot is what Industry 5.0 is, what post-COVID era is going to look like. And that's what I call as sustainable, accessible, feasible, and all of that is equal to e-commerce.
Thank you very much, Som. What a brilliant share. So much to learn. And keeping in line with the theme of the series, which is like transformational learning. These were such valuable shares, and I'm sure whoever's listening in and tuned in would pick up something and go home, and look at things differently. Thank you very much. I'll now go over to our next speaker. So let me introduce next speaker, Alok Medikipura. Alok is founder and director of Next Big Innovation Labs, NBIL, and member of World Economic Forum's Expert Network and Global Shapers Community. So Alok is passionate about using fourth industrial revolution technologies, such as 3D printing, to create large-scale societal impact. Phenomenal. And his team has been successful in the mission to bring made in India bioprinting technology to the labs of large global conglomerates, such as Merck Group in Germany. And right now, he's working on a breakthrough 3D bioprinting technology that will make critical life-saving medication much more affordable, and also reduce the dependence on animal testing by the cosmetic R&D industry. So like all of us know that, the COVID has presented new unforeseen global challenges at the community level. And Global Shapers community and its members have been instrumental in supporting our local communities during these very challenging times. And Alok, he's an active member of the Global Shapers community. And in today's presentation, he will take us through some of these initiatives and their impact. A bit about, let me tell you the theme about Alok's presentation today, which is empowering social innovation through communities. We'll keep hearing that word a lot, community. The community impact is phenomenal. And I think the first areas would be about technology as an enabler to effectively reach people and create a simplified communication channel between government and civil society. Secondly, the role of community in helping effectively tackle misinformation about COVID-19. That all of us are familiar with. That's been a challenge from the day one, and we still struggle with that. And lastly, Alok will also take us through examples of effective collaboration between government and civil society. And he'll be taking examples from the Global Shapers community, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum. So over to you, Alok. Welcome.
Thanks, Suparna, and hello to all the other fellow panelists. I appreciate the very warm introduction. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so we can get started with the presentation. So, hello to everyone who's joined in digitally. We are living in a very interesting time, even though the human race is always kind of prefer to interact, collaborate, work collectively. So we now live in an interesting time, fortunately or unfortunately, where we've had to spend a lot more time in front of our computers and in webinars such as this, rather than in packed rooms talking to people in person. So a brief introduction about the community that I want to kind of spend some time talking about today is the Global Shapers community, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum, as many of you all might know, is a global non-profit organization that's kind of specifically built towards building a stronger multi-partnership between different stakeholders that exist in the modern world. And the Global Shaper community is a youth-based organization that directly falls under the gambit of the World Economic Forum. So in today's presentation, I'll be specifically talking to you about three main focus areas. And as the summit for today clearly mentions, breakthroughs, innovation, and entrepreneurship. All three of them have a key role to play in helping us decide the future that we're going to start moving towards, the life after COVID, the life that we currently live with the fear of COVID around us in our communities. How is an organization such as the Global Shaper community, not just a chapter that I represent in Bangalore, but as a community, we have about 400 plus hubs spread across every major country around the world, representing about close to 10,000 Global Shapers. How does this community of the young people really look at disrupting the status quo and helping entrepreneurs such as myself, helping entrepreneurs who have been out there over the past few months, working closely with the government, working closely with nonprofits, working closely with other companies in a way to create disruptive solutions which can help us make our digital lives much easier or help us stay safe from COVID. So these are focus areas that we will look at in today's presentation. And with this, I'd like to get started. So as I mentioned, innovation, entrepreneurship, and breakthroughs clearly have something to do in terms of working with each other. When you look at entrepreneurship, it's basically the resilience of an entrepreneur to innovate is what really defines an entrepreneur in the modern world. And how about working towards a breakthrough? Innovation and entrepreneurship are clearly interlinked, as all of you all might agree, given the fact that entrepreneurship is about taking the road less traveled and about creating innovative solutions that don't currently exist out there in the market. The combination of an innovative entrepreneur is the kind of a future towards creating a breakthrough. be it in a specific COVID time, like say coming up with a vaccine, or coming up with effective solutions such as a clearer communication channel between the government and the people, or a safer community related communication channel to ensure that there's no spread of fake news. All of these matter in today's world. And what we're looking at in the presentation over the next few slides is not breakthrough innovations in terms of technological innovations, but it's just breakthroughs when it comes to how we've had to modify our lives to live with COVID around us, and how we'll have to modify our lives to ensure that we follow strict regulations such as social distancing norms, having specific masks on. So our lives are going to be very different. So those are the breakthroughs that we're trying to see about how entrepreneurs around us are trying to create solutions which will enable people to move into this life post-COVID. And bringing the three together and combining it with a community as powerful as the Global Shapers can give you an insight into how we've been able to not just bring solutions to market, but also look at scaling it across regions and collectively work with multi-stakeholders such as government and academia, as well as civil society, to ensure that the solutions we're building are kind of passed on to the real beneficiaries out there, the citizens. So with that, let's look a little bit more into what the field of entrepreneurship has taught us in these current times. So looking at resilience, so specifically as an entrepreneur, the biggest learning, the biggest lesson is the fact that you have to be resilient. You're always going to fail. You have to rise back, get back on your feet, get back on the ground, and start moving ahead. So I personally spent a lot of time over the past 2 months with the government as well as with frontline healthcare workers, helping them procure the right quality standard personal protective care in line with the rules that were set by CDC, WHO, as well as ICMR. And what we realized along the way is the journey from being a regular doctor, a regular nurse, a regular frontline worker, just serving in any specific job in a hospital, towards now trying to treat a COVID patient is a mammoth task. Just looking at the mental stress that a doctor goes through, just looking at the physical turmoil that they have to kind of manage, and the fear that even the PPE that they have on them is not enough to protect them is something that I felt was really a game-changing kind of revolution for me by personally interacting with these doctors. And what you see on screen is just a couple of components of 11-piece PPE that doctors have to wear in excess of 8 to 10 hours at a stretch. And these are personal protective care that is a mandatory requirement before they go into, say, a COVID isolation ward. This is, again, something new for doctors, but how they've adapted towards this change and how they've quickly, as a community, been resilient and been able to get together in even times when the government had taken certain, the government faced delays in procurement. So that really gives us kind of a good understanding of how great our frontline healthcare workers are, and a big salute to them. Moving on, in terms of planning with data, again, entrepreneurship has always taught us data-based decisions are what drives the company forward or the business forward, and it's less about leaving things to chance. So COVID really, actually, I think, gave the government a very good platform to actually look at incorporating data, collecting data, presenting data in a more simplified manner, and taking decisions. So I did spend some time over the past couple of months also with some key decision makers who were using the war room that was set up by the BBMP in Bangalore. And this specific war room had data collected right from the hospitals with regards to how many hospital beds they have open, data from every district level healthcare worker to understand if they're reporting the right amount of cases, and also from the Bangalore police, for example, to look at creating containment zones and so forth. So this clearly set an example for not just us as entrepreneurs out there, but to also all governments around the world, to say that decisions have to be taken based on data. And in the initial days, I think John Hopkins did a great job by starting off that trend, and then the government soon followed through, and we started collecting localized data and presenting it in a very simplified manner that could help key decision makers collectively look at, say, implementing a lockdown if need be, or understanding where there are kind of shortages in supplies and handle things much more effectively. So this again has been a very critical journey, especially for the government to say now, yes, I will start thinking of data much more seriously than I have in the past. And I think that's one positive side about COVID is now the government is starting to give more value to the data that's out there and starting to take more data-based decisions. So that really defines the fact that key things about entrepreneurship, which is data-based decisions and about being resilient. COVID has taught us to kind of also look into these key areas and innovate. So moving on to innovation. So we've all looked at the news that's been spreading. Social media is never the right channel to trust the kind of news you see. Fake news has always been a problem for regular citizens and the government. So one such problem statement that came in the early days of the lockdown is from the Bangalore Police Department, and they wanted an effective line of communication with the citizens. And this was an effective line of communication, not just to say issue passes, but even from a perspective of conveying the right information, because information was being generated, new government circulars were coming in, and any sort of fear of COVID spreading in a community was just coming in every so often, that generally it was a mammoth task for the government to look at a clear communication channel. So working with a couple of companies in Bangalore, startups, what we were able to do is quickly look at the same concept of a hackathon, look at a problem statement that was put forward by, say, the police department in this case, and then quickly come up with a chatbot. And this specific chatbot was made interactive as well as localized to meet the local demand, which was again available in two languages, Kannada and English specifically. So this just gives you an understanding of how innovation in this time is not about reinventing the wheel and trying to come up with a technologically evolved solution. It's about looking at what's already in our hands. It's about looking at what platforms people use as an existing solution. And it's about then devising specific strategies to use the technology that you have currently to convey the kind of message or kind of work more closely with the people. So collectively, again, this was a learning approach for the Bangalore police, and looking at this, other state governments also started kind of adopting the similar strategy, and so did the government of India through one of their own chatbots. So here, as you can see, collectively, we have a powerful platform like WhatsApp. A communication channel was necessary to get to the people, and then that had to be created. So it's about bringing the information creators closer with the people that want to know what's right, what's wrong. And paired with this was some sort of a simple dashboard, which really gave people an clearer insights in a simplified manner on how many cases there is in a specific locality, what sort of trends we're seeing in terms of the growth rate of cases and so forth. And this was very critical in the initial days, mainly because of the fear that was in people's mind. It was less about how many cases around us. It was the fear that, okay, is someone around me infected, in my community infected? And that fear was actually causing people to be quite harsh to their neighbors, quite harsh to specific communities. So to cut this specific problem, this was the most effective channel. And even today, it is being used collectively by a few thousand users on a daily basis to seek information right from the people that can give you the right info. Another area of innovation is always about cross-collaboration. It's less likely about what you create yourself. It's more about how do you collaborate with people that and create something more for your localized community. Here's an interesting problem statement. In the initial days, as most of you all would agree, there was very little information about coronavirus. And more importantly, like we previously spoke about, there was a lot more fake news spreading around on potential ways to pick up COVID and so forth. The government of India did its bit to look at how they could, in a simplified manner, use even platforms such as TikTok, use platforms such as Facebook to convey the right amount to people. But what really governments were lacking is the localization. And that localization is very important in a market like India, because when we look at such a diverse country that we represent, you're looking at so many languages being spoken across the length and breadth of the country. So we needed specific localized content. And one of our fellow Global Shaper hubs in Delhi was instrumental in actually looking at regular content that the World Health Organization, CDC, and others, reputable organizations, global organizations, were putting out as information. And they collectively put together a very nice information booklet that comprises not just what the virus was, but even precautionary measures such as social distancing much before it became a trend, even talking about how to use reusable masks, and even looking at how you could make your home a safe place and a non-COVID place. So taking inspiration from there, the Bangalore hub converted and translated this document into Kannada, and we were able to put this into the hands of politicians, put this into the hands of key people in the government that were handling the outflow of information. So this way, we believe as a community, we did something really small, which was just spending some time doing a translation for a document about 10 pages. But that powerful task actually impacted the lives of so many people, because even before the government put out clear circulars in Kannada in a much more detailed way, we were the first ones to do it. So this gives you an also kind of an appreciation to cross collaborate, especially in these times of COVID, when we are so distant away from each other. How do we really get together, collaborate? That's been a very critical concern for not just teams who work in the same offices, but businesses that have been kind of working with foreign clients and so forth. So this is something I feel COVID has really kind of given us a wake-up call, is to start going back and collaborating with people more. And it's less about you innovating by yourself, it's more about collaboration. Moving into the breakthroughs, like I mentioned, so breakthroughs today, when you look at a global scale, you're looking at a potential vaccine that can help us bring our lives onto being normal. You're looking at potential medication that can help people recover faster from COVID-related infections. But let's look at something more local. A problem that we see more locally is the amount of personal protective gear that's out there. Today, every doctor is being equipped by the government with state-of-the-art personal protective care that meets very stringent standards to ensure that their lives are safe when they are looking at servicing. I mean, when they're looking at doing their duty in the hospitals. But what happens to these PPEs once they leave those hospitals? We're looking at an outplus of PPEs that end up in disposable bags, potentially ending up and clogging landfills. Of course, these PPEs need to be incinerated, but today we don't have the right facilities to kind of dispose of with these PPEs. So you're looking at a potential scenario where you are going to be adding to the waste situation out there. So the CDC and the World Health Organization have recently launched a couple of circulars that gives specific guidelines and recommendations on how a lot of the personal protective gear, which is used much more commonly than a coverall suit, could be reused. Start thinking that big. Of course, we're supporting organizations and governments that want to go in that direction, but as a community, we felt we could do our bit to start looking at reusing PPEs and spreading that awareness about the PPEs. So what we have done as a Global Shaper community in Bangalore is in line with the national mission to look at promoting reusable masks, in line with the national mission to start looking at promoting again the textile industry that's been quite a backbone for the country to create jobs in the blue collar sector. We've been promoting the use of reusable cloth masks And this is through a unique concept in partnership with a company called Tatwa, based out of Bangalore. It's a unique concept where for every mask that is purchased, there is a mask donated to someone who's underprivileged. So those are areas where we've been, as a community, also collectively been able to work with, say, a startup that's come in and trying to create an impact. And I'd like to end with a very important part of, and I feel this is the most important breakthrough that we will have to see as a generation, as coming out of this COVID pandemic, mainly because this COVID pandemic has affected our mental health to a very large extent, has really affected daily work. So moving work into a digital platform is not as easy as we think. Spending lives in the same room under the same roof is not as easy as we think. Humans are social animals. So how do we, given the restrictions of stay at home, social distancing, 50% of workforce going into offices, when such restrictions do come in, how do we move towards the same life that we lived pre-COVID? So with that in mind, Global Shippers as a community has been doing a lot of webinars where we've been bringing in multi-stakeholders such as the government, the industry, academia, civil society, bring them all together to not just help the users and the listeners understand what COVID is, but help them prepare for lives post-COVID. We've been spending some time doing fun webinars, which include things such as a creativity jam. We've been looking at sending a positive kind of information to people in lines of a happy newsletter, which covers kind of positive news. We've been spending enough time with global shapers in our neighboring region. So in these times of turmoil, it's the kind of friendship that